On this International Women's Day, we'll take leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. Deputy Marylou McDonald.
Very happy International Women's Day to you and to all. Taoiseach, the price of energy and fuel has literally soared over the last year. And of course, prices have risen even more rapidly following the criminal Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has resulted, as we know, in an unprecedented disruption in the global energy market. Taoiseach, the cost of petrol at the pumps has gone up by 70 cents a litre since January of last year. And we're now at a point where many people can no longer afford to put fuel in their car to get to work. And this is particularly difficult for people who live in remote areas, in rural areas, or places where they do not have access to frequent public transport. In that same time frame, since January last year, the price of home heating oil has doubled. And households are now being charged more than €700 for a half fill of oil. So families now struggle to keep their homes warm. I know that many people are layering up with clothes. Some are just heating one room or not heating their home at all. Some people are staying in bed to stay warm, particularly seniors. So these fuel cost hikes are not sustainable for any worker, any family, or indeed for small businesses. As you know, Taoiseach, people are already hammered by extortionate rents, unaffordable house prices, and ever-rising costs in insurance and child care. So the cost of living was out of control anyway. I think your government now recognises, Taoiseach, in fairness, that what was announced in February doesn't go far enough to alleviate these pressures. But yet it seems you're not ready to take action this week to reduce the cost of fuel. But I want to put it to you, Taoiseach, that people can't wait any longer for relief, because they have to put fuel in their cars today. They have to pay for home heating oil today. Indeed, many wonder if they can afford to do it, or if they will have to decide which bill goes unpaid at the end of the week. And I think it's wrong that people have to make these kind of choices. I don't think it's any way to live a decent life. Tá frais bhrosla gordú ríis agus ní féidir le hibrithe le teaghlaí agus na gnólachtaí beaga cuineáil suas leis. Caithfí an rialtas dleachtáil ar petrol agus díosel a ghearra agus é a winch ó óla héite. Tuairfí sé seo sus atá ag tastal go géir ó daoine. So Taoiseach, I want to set out for you what we believe needs to happen. The government needs to cut the price of petrol and diesel through an immediate reduction in excise duty. At the pumps, we can get prices down by 25 cents per litre immediately by cutting excise duty. And similarly, the spiralling cost of home heating oil could be cushioned with the immediate and total removal of excise duty. Taoiseach, the Dáil won't sit next week, so these measures need to be introduced now as a matter of urgency, and it can be done. A financial resolution to immediately reduce excise duty on petrol and diesel and to remove excise duty from home heating oil could be passed today. This is what is used to increase or decrease excise duties in the budget. And as we know, those changes are typically made overnight. I'm asking that the government does this now, so that people would see an instant price reduction at the pumps and in their home oil bills by midnight. So I want to put it to you, Taoiseach, that you take this course of action. It would make a huge difference to workers, to families, to businesses, to hauliers, I know, to many providing school transport. They are literally at their wits' end. So I'm asking, Taoiseach, that a financial resolution be brought. We could indeed bring it to the House tonight or tomorrow night. Can I tell you, Sinn Féin will accommodate late sittings or whatever is required, but we need to act on this matter now.
Thank you, Count Corlin. I thank Deputy McDonald for raising this very important issue. And could I wish everybody a happy International Women's Day. And to say in that context, I think we're all agreed that our thoughts are with the women of Ukraine, who more than anybody have demonstrated extraordinary resilience in the face of the most enormous of challenges and the most impossible of choices as they bring their children to safety, leaving their husbands and partners apart. And we salute the women of the Ukrainian Parliament for resolutely defending democracy, staying in Kiev, defending the democracy and the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And just, if I could, I want to salute the bravery of journalism in the middle of this war, and particularly women journalists. And on the front page of the New York Times, we would have seen that horrific photograph of a family murdered by Russian forces, captured by Lindsay Addario, a person who's spent her career documenting war crimes and documented one here. And that brings us really to one of the impacts of the Ukrainian war will undoubtedly be, as Deputy McDonald has said, its impact on inflation, on fuel prices and energy prices. Prior to the war, we've already had significant increases in fuel prices. And government took steps in the budget of about £1 billion, £500 million most recently, to deal with that phase of what was then described as a pandemic-derived cycle of inflation. But there's no question but that the war on Ukraine is going to increase further, and has increased further, the escalation of fuel prices in terms of fuel at the petrol pump, household costs and so on. So government is acutely aware of this issue. We don't argue that the impacts of people are not sustainable at the rate that these increases are occurring, because Russia's systemic role in energy supply will have significant impact on prices, and with implications for inflation and production costs. And pass-through price effects are going to be affected in other areas. We can see it in fertilizers, and obviously fuel and transport costs, and food. Food is another key issue of concern for government, given that Russia and Ukraine, between them, export so much grain to the West. And therefore we do have to take measures to try and offset what is likely to be an interruption in terms of those exports for one reason or another as a consequence of the war in Ukraine. You're correct, we know that the barrel of oil on international markets has soared from about $96 a barrel in the end of February, 23rd of February, to about 126, 130 today, and rising. It's speculating it could hit 150, could hit 200 this year. The natural gas has grown exponentially in price also. So I can say to the Deputy that there is a EU Commission paper on this toolbox emerging. Hopefully within the next day or two will be published and will be considered, but also the government is giving this very active consideration. We do understand the time, the scheduling in terms of the legislator and so on like that, but I appreciate your offer of facilitation of whatever outcome of the government's active consideration of this issue will mean. And I don't want to get into specifics right now.
Thank you. So Taoiseach, nobody is disputing the international context for these soaring prices, but I hope nobody is disputing either that householders, families, workers, hauliers, those, as I said, providing school transport, are now at their wits' end, and their crisis is now. It's in the immediacy of now. It's a question of how you get to work, how you get about, how you heat your home today, tomorrow and next week. And I'm well aware that the EU Commission is bringing forward two proposals, and we certainly look forward to seeing them. But we would regard those by way of additionality to what government in Dublin needs to do now. So I've made a very concrete ask of you, Taoiseach. I am asking again that a financial resolution be brought before the Dáil this week, tonight or tomorrow night, that will have the effect of reducing excise on petrol and diesel, that will have the effect of a 25 cent per litre reduction at the petrol pumps immediately for consumers, that this resolution would equally have the effect of removing excise entirely from home heating oil to take some of the sting out of that soaring cost. And I'm asking you, Taoiseach, to do this now. Speed is of the essence because people are suffering and struggling now.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach, please.
Yeah, could I say at the outset that since the outbreak of war in Ukraine, government has been very actively considering the country's response to the unfolding crisis and the consequences of that crisis. And that's across a whole range of areas, as I've outlined, some of them in terms of our humanitarian response. And suffice to say that the impact of the war will be very, very serious and significant for all nations across the European continent, and it will be a long haul in terms of our response to it. And what we would normally do in normal times will no longer be the approach that we will have to take as a society. We will have to look outside the norm, outside the box in terms of dealing with this crisis. And that applies to the specific issue that you've raised, as well as other issues. But as I've said to you, the government is keeping this under very, very active consideration, and will be responding once that is once that process of consideration is concluded.